All right, welcome back to the Massive and Passive Income Show. I'm Jason.
And I'm Colter. We're going to talk about the 1% rule, the rule of 72, and then the 4% rule.
Sounds good.
Abide by some of these rules and establish other rules for yourself.
Definitely.
Back into these numbers, create the goal, go for the objective of, I'm going to retire on this amount, and the math doesn't lie.
Yeah.
So let's dive in. The 1% rule is actually what I established a lot of my early real estate portfolio off of.
Same with me.
And it's harder to meet that rule right now, isn't it, Jason?
We used to go through the paper and we'd look at all the stuff for sale. And if it met the 1% rule from what we thought it could rent for what it's selling for, we'd circle it. We'd go down the paper, and we do that about every three times a week. And then we make phone calls after we went through and see if we could make a deal happen with some of them. But yeah, it's really tough to make that happen. So explain to us what the 1% rule is. Some people may not know what that is.
Okay, the 1% rule basically says if I buy a property for $200,000, I need to rent that for $2,000 per month, which is 1% of the total purchase price that I can take in monthly rent to cover all of the costs associated with buying a $200,000 property. Meaning $2,000 should cover my principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and still leave me enough profit to make it worth me investing in that particular property.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah. And then we even took it to even further than that. As another 1% is we'd like to get at least $200, $100 per door, or $200 in cash flow. So we used to do the 1%, and then the 1% on the $2,000. So $200,000 property should make you $2,000, and the $2,000 you should have $200 left over for cash flow. That's kind of how we gauged back in the day, but it's really tough to meet that.
Yeah,
It really is.
it really is.
In fact, I remember you talked about a property, and we were going through it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I think that meets the 1% rule. We were both like, no way, because you don't see that very often right now. Yeah.
No, you don't. So chasing those, you got to go a little bit further out, or you got to be more creative.
Yes.
And there are still, in the United States of America, there are properties throughout the nation that meet this 1% rule.
Definitely.
It means we have to look in different places, right? In eastern Idaho, it is difficult to figure that out. In the greater Idaho or the greater Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, western states, it is difficult to hit those. But when you're talking about the Midwest or the South and these different locations throughout the nation, there are opportunities that will meet this 1% rule that allow for you to buy a property, rent it for 1% of the total purchase price, and be profitable from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Because investors, you need to be able to make a decision quick. And I think that's why some of these, I don't know if I would call them shortcuts, but kind of a shortcut of figuring out whether I even want to make an offer on the property or not. Because, man, right now properties go so fast. If a deal is good and it meets the 1% rule, it's probably got 10 offers if investors are doing their homework on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think shortcuts is a fine term, right? But let's define it as processes or
Yeah,
procedures or rules of engagement, right?
I like the rules of engagement.
I'm not getting engaged unless I know what I'm getting into.
It's
right?
so true.
And as you went through the newspaper and you were able to say, hey, you know what, this one we think will meet this 1% rule, like you're selecting properties so if you're going through 100 properties and you're able to narrow it down to 10 you're potentially interested in, that's 90 you don't even have to call on.
Exactly. And that, man, I tell you what, that made a big difference for us.
Yeah. So it's all a law of averages or a law of the number of it's statistics, right? It's hitting metrics. So let's talk about one of those other metrics.
Okay.
So we're investors. How do you determine whether you're going to be able to double your money or not? And in what time frame?
I don't know. I mean, what's the rule called? Rule of 72. 72. There you go. I knew it. I was going to say 70, but I knew that wasn't right. Rule of 72. Yep.
So the rule of 72 basically says, all right, if we are earning this amount of interest on our money, on our investment, you take that average amount of interest and you divide that into the number 72, that will calculate out to the number of years it will take for you to double your money.
Love that.
So So we can basically break it up into, and I think if my math is right, if I can make 8% every single year for consistently until my money is doubled, and it's compounding, right?
Yeah.
So 8% every year until it's doubled, 72 divided by 8, it basically comes out to 9.
Okay.
Yeah, 80 divided by 8 is 10. You know,
word for it.
We're going to go off the off the cuff here, but so 72 divided by 8 equals 9 years.
So 9 years, you double your investment.
Yeah.
Is what you're talking about.
Yep. So if I can make 10% on my money, it takes me 7.2 years to double my money.
Wait, don't you take your years of service and how old you are, and then that reaches to 90? Oh, that's something different. That's retirement for working for somebody. I'm just teasing. No, but double your investment, that's huge. I think for most people, when they think about renting a property, they're like, wow, it's going to take forever to get any money out of this. Because they look at it as, $100 a month? That's not going to change my life any. But if you can say, hey, look, in 10 years, you can double your investment, that's huge. Mm-hmm. That's huge. Especially if the investment was $200,000 or $300,000 or whatever it is. I mean, that's big. But to just look and say, I'm going to make $100 a month, that doesn't get very many people excited.
No.
So you have to look at it a couple of different ways. And that's where when you get the investor mindset together and you start looking at these properties, I want to meet the 1% rule of 72. And I know you got another rule that it just, you take the whole picture in and you're like, wow, that is a great investment. Great investment. Not only am I going to be able to meet the 1% rule, but I'm going to be able to pay or double my money within 10 years or 12 years. And you've got another one too that I'm excited to hear about. But we use the rule of 72 whenever we were using somebody else's money, or whenever we were at the bank trying to get them to fund something for us. We were like, look, this is what we're going to be able to do. And this is what we're going to have in the timeline we're going to be able to do it. And a lot of times that clicked for people that know numbers and they're like, oh, that makes sense. And as long as your numbers are right, your numbers over here should be right. Mm-hmm. It's when your numbers are wrong, your numbers don't end up like they should be. Yeah. So.
Well, and this all comes with the end objective is like, we want to make money in investing, right? We're trying to get a return on our investment.
Yep.
And so ultimately we're trying to create a nest egg. So let's talk about this nest egg. And let's say we've got somebody that has invested and done a consistent job. They started at 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years old. And now they've accumulated let's call it a $1 million nest egg that they're able to pull from in retirement.
Okay.
So we can't just spend the $1 million all in the first year of retirement.
No.
That doesn't work for very long, right? But if we talk about how do we make sure that we manage that portfolio or manage that nest egg, in the world of financial advising is basically if you take your $1 million and you split it up and you want that to last for 30 years, you can take 4% of your portfolio value or 4% of your nest egg and you can spend that every single year and it will last for 30 years in retirement.
So that's I've heard that a couple of different ways, but I like the way you explained it better. So 4%, say that again. 4%
of my nest egg.
Of your nest egg.
I can spend on my normal day-to-day expenses on an annual basis. And it will last me for 30 years.
So let's for easy math, you have $1 million portfolio. 5% is what?
$50,000.
$50,000, exactly. So that's if you're already collecting some kind of retirement, or if you've already got some kind of other stuff that's coming in, an extra $50,000 a month, and your portfolio stays the same. That's pretty awesome.
So $50,000 a month, it would last for 30 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that unless you're only planning on living for 30 months. Then go have fun.
Yeah, anyways, we're not going to dive into 30 months of.
So I love that too, because then you can back into the numbers. How much money do you need to retire? Well, I need $100,000. Well, great. Then you need $2 million worth of real estate so that you can live off that 4% or 5%, or I said 5 because it was easy math, but still. So 2.4 million. That'll give you 4%. That'll give you 100,000. Did I do my math right on that one? Close enough. So I love that.
I was going to go 5 million divided by 4%. That gives you $200,000 a year.
There you go. I love that. I mean, that's the thing. I think whenever you can back into numbers, I think it's easier to comprehend it. Like, how much money do you need to retire? What do you want to do in retirement? Is it 200,000? Is it 100,000? Some people are like, man, if I just had 50 grand a year, well, I mean, then you need $1 million or pretty close.
Well, and if you're considering all these other things, when you near the age of retirement, right, you've potentially paid off your home, you've paid off vehicles.
Yes.
So living on $50,000 is a good possibility that somebody could be comfortable.
And here's what's great about that law or that rule is at the end of 10 years, you still have $1 million worth of portfolio and probably even more, right? Because you're just living off that 4% rule. So you're not diminishing it at all, right?
Right. As long as you're investing it in conservative, things. And that's where at the end of a career is you don't want to be just risking everything.
Yes.
You want to be conservative. And I guess you want is kind of a loose term, right? Most advisors are going to say, hey, you know what? We're not going to put this in the really risky stuff. Like we're not chasing 12 to 18% returns.
Yeah.
We're chasing 4 to 8% that can be diversified into a portfolio that's going to return enough for you to be able to live and grow, still grow, or be able to take more in some years and less in others.
Because I think most people are afraid of outliving their retirement.
Yeah.
I mean,
and they should be.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes the fear drives us to be able to do something, and sometimes it cripples us.
Yeah.
But this is where, in my mind, like the numbers don't lie. So what we're trying to establish is a basis of a vision of like what it is that I need to have, because $200,000, that allows for me to travel a whole bunch and be able to be in the places that I want to.
See your family.
I can live in Costa Rica for 3 months. I can live in, Kazakhstan or wherever, right?
Wherever. Live on a cruise ship for 2 months.
Yeah, or 2 years.
2 years.
I can't believe they canceled that one. Did you hear about that? Yeah, I mean, they had this 2-year cruise that people had sold their homes, their condos, their places in New York, and they committed to going and being on a cruise for 2 years, and they canceled it within a couple of weeks prior to departure.
How do you do that? They got their money back,
Yeah,
right?
well, I think they're in pretty hot water that it's not happening the way that customers are thinking it should.
Wow.
So anyways, yeah, I mean, we can do all of these things if we just back into it and we create, and we envision and intentionally create the goals that we want to.
Yeah.
So
I had a friend who on Facebook, his daughter put out there and said, hey, I want to know how do you make your grocery bill last longer throughout the month? And he says, just go on a cruise and all your food's free. But he just got off a 45-day cruise. So I'm like, yeah, that's good. Thanks for that. Yeah. Yeah, his daughter wasn't too happy with it. But I thought it was funny.
Well, okay, so we covered the 1% rule, the rule of 72, and the 4% rule.
Yeah, I love that 4% rule. I've heard of people do it a little bit differently, but I like the way you explain it because it's a lot easier for me to, if you get too technical, like a confused mind, quits. And so you got to keep it basic. And I like that's why I like the 1% rule. I like the rule of 72, and I love that 4% rule because that helps you be able to gauge quick and do quick math and be able to figure out, okay, am I on track? Because if you're 60 years old and you've only got 500,000, over the next 5 years, if you want to retire at 65, you got to find another, you got to double what you have right now. Mm-hmm. Or if you got $2 million right then, and you're like, you know what, we'll keep investing, but we're good. We're going to hit what we need to hit, and we're going to be just fine throughout retirement. Yeah.
Well, and I think too is as people near that retirement age, if they're going to be receiving a pension or something else, so let's say they're going to receive, $5,000 a month, having retired from a particular place, but then they have $500,000 over here, and they take 4% of that, that's another $20,000 per year they're able to receive on top of their $5,000 a month, which is $60,000 a year. So now they know that they can rely for the rest of their lives or for at least 30 years on $8,000 per, I didn't do that right, $7,000 per month, and they'll be able to they won't have to outlive their money.
Yeah. My father-in-law, he got an early buyout. He worked for the New York State. Anyways, they come in and say, hey, we're going to do an early buyout. They gave him I don't know how many years they gave him, 6-8 years. Then they doubled something and did something else. And anyways, made it so he could retire at age 48. 48, he retired. And sure, if he would have put another, time in or whatever else, he would have got more per month. But he goes, I'd be crazy not to take this right now. So he took it, and either next year or maybe it's in 2 years, he's gonna pull from retirement longer than he actually worked there. And he goes, that's my goal. I was like, stop saying that, because in 2 years you're probably gonna die. Because you're saying that's my only goal is to take from the system more than I put in. Or years wise.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's awesome. And then his wife also worked for the state. So they've got both 2 New York State pensions that's paying him every single month.
Wow.
And it's awesome. I mean, even though they're still on a budget, it's a pretty awesome budget for both of them to be pulling, and then they've got some other money saved up, whatever else. But I think that's where most people are at. I think if you go across the board, I think most people, unless they have some fat pension that they know is going to be there later on, which a lot of people don't. A lot of people are like, wow, there's companies shutting down. They're pulling from their pension to help save the company, which is legal in most states. They can do that, corporations. If they're going to go under, they could they could borrow from the pension. But then if they go bankrupt anyways, that money never comes back. So as long as you got some awesome pension that you know is going to be there, then supplement. But I say never just rely on whatever it is you think is going to come in. Always try to supplement with something else, because you never know what's going to happen. You just don't. Even if it's a state, federal government, or even the state that's paying your pension or paying you each month. I mean, who knows what ding-dongs we'll have in there in the next 5-10 years and what they're going to do with the money that's there. I mean, Social Security, that was supposed to be there for everybody. And if anybody's 50 years old right now or younger and are expecting Social Security to take them through the golden years, you got to do something different. I do not think it's going to be there. It's going to run out. So yeah. I love that.
So there you go. There's a rundown. Abide by some of these rules and establish other rules for yourself.
Definitely.
But do the math of what it is you want to live on. And you can do this at age 30 of like, okay, what do I have now? And if I start spending my money, what's going to get me to age 60?
Yeah.
Or 60 to 90, or, back into these numbers, create the goal, go for the objective of, I'm going to retire on this amount, and the math doesn't lie.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for bringing that up, Colter. I love the rules. Rules are good to live by.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Good deal.